Should we trust the government? I'd say no, and you'll see why at the end of this video. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we are counting down our list of the top 10 terrifying government documents you should never ask Alexa about. It's one thing to go around asking about government documents, but asking Alexa about them? No way. Now let's get on to the list. Number 10. Unidentified aerial phenomena. In 2020, the US Department of Defense, DoD, authorized the US Navy to release video of 3 incidents, one in 2004 and the others in 2015, in which Navy fighter pilots had encountered unidentified aerial phenomena, which is another way of saying UFOs. After a thorough review, the department has determined that the authorized release of these unclassified videos does not reveal any sensitive capabilities or systems and does not impinge on any subsequent investigations of military airspace incursions by unidentified aerial phenomena, DoD noted in the press release. The COVID-19 relief bill passed by Congress in 2020 also included a provision requiring various government agencies to release their files on UFOs. They released an assortment of documents, including the mysterious report of a sighting of multiple fast-moving flying objects over Stalingrad in 1954. So if you want to learn more about UFOs, check all that information out. Number 9. Space Shuttle Challenger. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight and ended the lives of all 7 crew members aboard instantly. The spacecraft disintegrated 46,000 feet above the air in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Cape Canaveral, Florida at 11:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It was the first fatal accident involving an American spacecraft in flight. It was thought that all the astronauts passed away instantly, but it was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware as they plummeted towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is terrifying. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was, so they kept this a secret. And I'm gonna be honest, I do understand their reasoning for this, but it's just sad. Number 8. Enhanced interrogation techniques. This 2004 report by the CIA's Inspector General, initially released in heavily redacted form by the George W. Bush administration, and then again with fewer deletions by the Obama administration, describes enhanced interrogation techniques used on Al-Qaeda detainees. The techniques detailed in the document include walling, which prisoners were pulled forward and then pushed into a wall, slaps to the face, stress positions, sleep deprivation, and waterboarding, in which the detainee's head is immobilized and an interrogator places a cloth over the detainee's mouth and nose while pouring water onto the cloth in a controlled manner, with the effect of restricting airflow for 20 to 40 seconds and creating the sensation of drowning and suffocation. Another technique involved confining a detainee in a box for up to 18 hours, sometimes with a harmless insect placed inside as well to increase the discomfort. Now that just sounds cruel. Number 7. Heart attack gun. The CIA developed an assassination weapon that was essentially a poison gun. It was a that fires a pellet made of ice that was coated with a special toxin made from shellfish. The pellet only left behind a tiny red mark on the skin that would be ignored since there was no blood. The toxin induced a heart attack and left no trace in the victim's blood. Well, how was it created? Well, going to work for the CIA as an 18-year-old high school graduate, Mary Embry was a secretary in a division tasked with devising hidden microphones and other audio surveillance equipment before being promoted to the Office of Technical Services. Eventually, she was ordered to find an undetectable poison. Her research led her to conclude that shellfish toxins were the ideal choice. Unbeknownst to her, Mary had been made a part of Project MK Naomi, a highly secretive program dedicated to crafting biological weapons for the United States Cold War arsenal. Her findings were destined to form the basis of the brass ring of Black Ops, ending the life of a human being and getting away with it. Number 6. Devil Eyes. Devil Eyes was the code name for a secret psychological warfare program in 2005 to 2006 by the CIA to develop an action figure of Osama bin Laden and distribute it in South Asia, especially Afghanistan and Pakistan. The CIA worked in conjunction with toymaker Donald Levine, a former Hasbro executive. Donald designed a 12-inch lifelike figure of bin Laden whose face was painted with a material that, when heated, would peel off to reveal a demon-like visage with red skin, green eyes, and black markings. The goal of the program was to scare the children and their parents to turn public opinion against the real Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda. In 2014, the CIA acknowledged the existence of the program but said it had been discontinued after Donald had produced only 3 prototype figurines. One of the 3 known prototypes is believed to be in the ownership of the CIA, but according to the Washington Post, however, an anonymous source in China with direct knowledge of the project said that hundreds of the toys were created and shipped to Pakistan in 2006. What? The government lying? No way. Number 5. Operation PBSuccess. Codename Operation PBSuccess was a CIA operation to overthrow Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz in June 1954 and end the Guatemalan Revolution. PBSuccess was authorized by Eisenhower in August 1953. The operation was granted a budget of $2.7 million for psychological warfare and political action. The total budget has been estimated between $5 and $7 million, and the planning employed over 100 CIA agents. In addition, the operation recruited scores of individuals from among Guatemalan exiles and the populations of the surrounding countries. After its success overthrowing the president, the US installed the military dictatorship of Carlos Castro Armas, the first in a series of US-backed authoritarian rulers in Guatemala. The CIA armed, funded, and trained an army which ended the lives of many civilians. Number 4. Operation Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax was an operation carried out by the CIA as a subproject of Project MK-Ultra, the mind control research program that began in the 1950s. It was initially established in 1954 by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and placed under the direction of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in Boston, Massachusetts. Under the Cold War and fears of the Soviet Union and China, Dr. Sidney felt inspired to investigate methods of mind control. Operation Midnight Climax gave him permission to test drugs on unknowing citizens. So essentially, the government just hired sex workers to dose their clients with LSD for mind control research purposes. Official results of these experiments were not released, but accounts from supervisors of the experiments give a little insight to the findings. George Hunter White, an agent at the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and Ike Feldman, a former military intelligence officer who saw San Francisco experiments, noticed that the subjects spoke far more freely when under the influence of a combination of drugs and sex. No one knows where the subjects are now or what effects they may have suffered. Operation Midnight Climax was considered to be so secretive that few people, even in the highest government positions, knew Dr. Sidney existed, let alone was conducting these experiments. However, some senior officers in the CIA knew enough about him to connect his work to LSD. Number 3. Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against American citizens that originated within the US Department of Defense of the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for CIA operatives to both stage and commit acts of terror against American military and civilian targets, blaming them on the Cuban government and using it to justify the war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the remote control of civilian aircraft, which would be secretly repainted as a US Air Force planes, a fabricated shoot-down of a US Air Force fighter aircraft, a fabricated shoot-down of a US Air Force fighter aircraft off the coast of Cuba, the possible assassination of Cubans' immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on high seas, blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating terror in US cities. This was proposed to President John F. Kennedy, but thankfully rejected it. Then, because of this, US military leaders began to perceive Kennedy as going soft on Cuba, and the president became increasingly unpopular with the military. But good on him for not going through with that. Number 2. Project MINARET. As the result of National Security Archive's efforts, the National Security Agency in 2003 declassified an historical document describing a watch list of critical of the Vietnam War whose overseas communications were tapped by the government from 1967 to 1973. Project MINARET was a domestic espionage project operated by the National Security Agency, which, after intercepting electronic communications that contained the names of pre-designated US citizens, passed them to other government law enforcement and intelligence organizations. Intercepted messages were spread to the FBI, CIA, Secret Service, Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs (BNDD), and the Department of Defense. President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad, one document explains. It expanded to include surveillance of more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders Martin Luther King Jr. and Whitney Young, Muhammad Ali, Democratic U.S. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, New York Times columnist Tom Wicker, and the Washington Post humor columnist Art Butchwald. all. The surveillance operation continued under the Nixon administration until Attorney General Elliot Richardson, who was concerned about its doubtful legality, decided to shut it down during the Watergate scandal in September 1973. Yeah, that's just creepy. And coming in at number 1 is Project 100,000. Project 100,000 was a controversial 1960s program by the United States Department of Defense to recruit soldiers who would previously have been below military mental or medical standards. This included a lot of Americans with an IQ below 70. Majority of these men didn't have above a 9th grade education. Project 100,000 was initiated by Defense Secretary Robert McNamara in October 1966 to meet the escalating manpower requirements of the American government's involvement with the Vietnam War. These soldiers were mostly given jobs on the front lines of the war, and it was worded as a service project, and they were told they would help them gain skills needed to live a better life after the service. In reality, they were cannon fodder to the DoD and died at a much higher rate than their non-disabled counterparts. These men largely couldn't read, write, or understand why they were in Vietnam or what they were there to do. They suffered more cases of post-traumatic stress, lower unemployment rates, and higher rates of divorce and ending their lives. This is just extremely sad and makes me so angry. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 terrifying government documents you should never ask Alexa about. Remember kids, the next time someone says the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would. Which one do you think is the worst? Let us know in the comments down below, and hey, why not give this video a like while you're down there, and also subscribe. I'm your host Emily, and I'll see you next time. Peace.